What's up, everybody? Dude, I'm blind, coming at you again. So, it's the new year. I had a couple new resolutions, or as we decided to call them, intentions this year myself. And one of the ones that I wanted to share with you is I want to become a little bit more flexible. Now, it's really easy to just say, I want to be more flexible, and you could work on your flexibility forever and just keep on trying to work on this muscle, that muscle. So, in order to kind of bring it down to something that's a little more tangible and easier for me to do, I wanted to make sure it's something that one is going to be the most beneficial for me, counteract the bad habits that I keep on constantly getting into, for number two. And then number three, something I'm going to be able to keep on doing constantly. Because if I do a 30-minute stretch routine every single day, for me personally, it's too much. I can't handle that. So I decided that we're just going to do 3 major muscle groups. There is kind of a fourth one thrown in there, but it's there for benefit because it's part of one of the stretches. But really, we're just focusing on 3, and it's going to come down to 5 minutes of stretching a day. Now, for best results, I would definitely tell you do this in the morning and then do this in the afternoon or at night. If you can get a third time in, great. Most of these positions are going to be ones we're not in, and so we're usually going to be tight and going in the opposite direction of all of it, okay? So the best thing to do is to continuously be stretching throughout the day, and just a little 30-second stretch here is not going to counteract the hours and hours of sitting or something like that you're going to be doing. So let's get into some of these stretches. All right, first stretch is not going to surprise you. This is a common one that you see pretty much everywhere. It's one that everybody thinks about. Ooh, I got tight hamstrings. I got tightness. You know, getting into that stretch. Now, this stretch is done improperly, so very, very, very frequently. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy, and I see this all the time where people try to do the stretch, and realistically what you're doing, and a lot of it is you're stretching out your back, but you're not actually stretching out your hamstring. So, the important things for you to know. First, why in the world are we doing this stretch? Your hamstring does 2 main functions. It bends your knee, and it extends your hip. So when you're sitting in a chair or wherever you might be, that knee is constantly bent. That means that this hamstring all the way through here and coming up to the back through here, up to the pelvis, it's all tightened up because it is in a shortened position the majority of the day. The problem that happens with all of this is that if it is shortened the majority of the day, when you go to stand up, you can't extend all the way, and you're just kind of being stuck in this semi-flexed position. The other parts of your body are saying, we don't want to go into that place, and they're trying to pull against you. So it's going to be important for us to keep stretching these muscles. It is going to be also important for some of the other muscles that we're doing for the same reasons, because we're stuck in these positions and we want to make sure that we're limber and we're able to move through all of these transitional movements like getting up and walking and stairs and all of that without creating any compensations, because it's those compensations over time that's gonna lead to some trouble, to a little bit of back pain here, a little bit of that there, some knee discomfort. All that stuff is just gonna add up, so you have to really do more preventative kind of things like these stretches in order to help you out. So we got it here. We're counteracting the bending of the knee by straightening the knee. So you got that first portion. Great. The second portion that you have to know, it's the hip extension. Extension is going to be going back this way. You're extending closer to being all the way upright. So if that is what the hamstring does, what you need to do now is counteract it by bending forward. Now it is so vitally important that here we bend forward, and it's the hips that are primarily going to have to be moving. It's this angle. So the cue is belly button forward, not hunching over like this. Because you can hunch over forward like this all you want. You're not affecting the hamstring. You're affecting your erector spinae and all these other muscles through here that we're not focusing on right now. That's not the point, and so you're getting all these benefits you're thinking that you're getting them for your hamstrings, and realistically you're not stretching them correctly. They stay tight, other muscles get elongated, and you get an imbalance. out of all this. So, belly button, straight forward, and there you go. Honestly, I feel mine right there. It should be pretty quick. You should not have to go all the way down and all this. All of this reaching stuff, your hamstrings do not go up to your arms. The reaching, there's nothing wrong with the reaching as long as you're understanding that. Belly button to the thighs. That's the important part. Now this is the one where you can get an additional stretch if you want and flex your toes and feet up towards you and get your calves stretched out a little bit. Also an important one because we usually sit in a lot of plantar flexion, pointing of our toes. So that's gonna be a really, really good one for you to stretch out there. And honestly, just sit here for a minute. That simple. Mild to moderate stretching. You don't wanna push into any kind of pain or any kind of severe stretching because our muscles have a mechanism that if they think that they're being damaged, they're gonna actually shorten even more and avoid that stretching response. So you do not want to crank into these. A lot of people think, oh yeah, no pain, no gain. Not in this case, mild to moderate. It's gonna be consistency that gets you a little bit more flexible and less into these compensations than it's gonna be just, oh, I stretched out really, really hard for 30 seconds. No. So right here, going for a minute. All right, let's move on to our next one. So, we did the hamstrings in the back. The next important one, when you're sitting, right here, these muscles, they're called your hip flexors. Flexion of the hip, opposite of extension, what we talked about before, of bringing that all the way up, okay? So the hamstrings are important because your knee is constantly bent, right? But you have this slight counteraction where you have the hip flexed the entire time that you're sitting on the computer, driving, eating, flex, 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 flex. We'll live in this position, and when we stand up, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. Here's the problem. The hip flexors, some of them, sure, attached to the hip, but there are others, my personal favorite muscle called the iliopsoas, it goes from your leg and attaches actually to the front part of your spine. So with all of these attachments on the pelvis, on the low back, what ends up happening is if this is tight, when you stand up, instead of being able to extend properly, this is all pulling you forward. And you end up standing in this kind of a position where your low back is turned forward and tweaked. And so it's in this constant compressive state, which it's not happy being in. And so at first you may go, I have no back pain. But as this goes on for a year, 2 years, 3 years, it builds up and all of a sudden you're starting to get pain. And it's all stemming from you sitting here and this being very, very tight. So let's get at these hip flexors a little bit. Now, when you're doing this, obviously it is important that you have that hip all the way back and extended. The other portion of this, as you saw, it is important where my body is in space. Because if I lean forward like this, my leg can be all the way back there, but that hip flexor is not on stretch, and so you're not getting all the benefits. You have to be up straight, and you can actually get a little bit of a side bend away from where the muscle attachments are so that you can get a little bit of a stretch there. And all you're doing, get a little bit of support for balance, because if you're trying to balance during some of these stretches, you're using a lot of stabilization muscles and you're not getting the benefit of the stretch. Is it important to practice your balance? Of course, not part of what we're doing here. So, you're here, you're stretching. The two things where people kind of mess up is one I told you, they kind of bend forward, and then the other one is you gotta squeeze your butt. Honestly, if you squeeze your butt and kind of shift your hips a little bit forward, you will feel all that stretch. This will come, the front part of your thigh, that's where the muscle is. You're gonna feel that pulling. So stay here, same thing, let's go for a minute here, and then you just swap on over to the other side, okay? Making sure you don't bend over. Now you can practice this. You will see that if you bend to the side, you will feel less and less of a stretch over here, okay? So this is important right there. Now if you don't want to do kneeling is best because it stops the compensations that you're gonna have. Now, a lot of people are gonna compensate at the knee and at the ankle very, very easily. This really just kind of focuses on you're using the knee for support because that's the one that's touching the ground, and the hip is really the one that you're kind of working on. You can do this standing up in this kind of lunge position. You really have to focus on making sure that the leg is nice and straight. You're not turning this or that way, and still right here, this is important. Where's your torso? Where's your hip? Where the leg is behind? Because if you're bending forward and you're going, I'm not feeling this at all, well, of course you're not, because you're slacking it by bending forward like that. Can't have that, and got to be nice and upright. All right, so a minute of that on each side, and we've got one more stretch left, all right, to finish it all off. So that you're doing the hamstring stretch for a minute, you're doing the hip flexor stretch, the one that we just did, 1 minute apiece, okay? And so you have this one for another minute, and then the transitional times in between are gonna take you a couple seconds here or there. So overall, it should not take you more than 5 minutes because you're stretching for 4, transitioning between stretches for the remainder of that 1 minute altogether. Now, can you hold these for longer if you've got the time or you wish to? Absolutely. But right now, we're just focusing on, can you get consistent with this? 5 minutes in the morning and then 5 minutes in the afternoon. All right, last part. How do we normally end up sitting, right? We sit like this, everything's always down, we're always hunched over, okay? So your lats right through here, okay? They come up and they affect a lot of your back as well. Huge muscle, big muscle, okay? Limits your ability to put your arms overhead. If we want to be athletic in any way, shape, or form and do a lot of overhead things, hanging, pushing things overhead, right? Any kind of the carries that you might want to do, any kind of yoga or anything supportive that you want to do, you have to be able to be flexible. There's flexibility that comes from there, and tightness comes from your inability to stabilize there. So stabilization overhead and those kind of things we can talk on in further videos, but we got to stretch that out. How do you do that? Great little stretch called child's pose, all right? All you're doing is, remember, lats, what do? Okay? They pull down. They pull down, and they actually, what they also do is they internally rotate your shoulder. So they turn things in. So we have to go up, and then you gotta turn your palm up. That's the external rotation piece right there. And you can do both at the same time, just like that. Spread your legs, sink back. Very easy. Now, a lot of you may not feel a stretch with this, and that is perfectly fine. You can do one of two things. You can, one, walk your hand over to the opposite side. So if you go to the left, you will feel more of a stretch on the right side. All right, and then similarly walk it on over to the other side to feel that. Okay? That is your first go-to. Second, find some kind of a chair, sofa, anything elevated, a box, and then you can put your arms right on there, and then the same thing. Remember, it's all about at the shoulder. Now, when you go here, it is very easy for you to arch your back. Now, that is a compensation for this. And so if you can, you want to try to tuck your tailbone under, and you'll feel more and more of that stretch, because that is going to be the opposite of that extension that you're trying to get into of the lumbar spine to try to slack the lats. We don't want to slack the lats in this case because we're trying to stretch them. So, important thing to say here, it is very easy to get into this position, especially when you have your arms up there, and then try to just crank into your shoulders. Any kind of issues at the shoulders, any kind of impingement, which we tend to get into, you do not want to crank into, okay? All these should be done very gently and feel it out. Like I told you at the beginning, mild to moderate, okay? If you're getting any kind of sharp pain or any kind of discomfort with any of these stretches, that's something for you to go ahead and get checked out with somebody else. You can go to a physical therapist. That is something that could easily be kind of looked at, or double check with a doctor as well. But none of this should you just crank into no matter what, okay? All these should be gentle and sustainable. Those are one of the important things that we've been trying to kind of get at. All right. So you've got the 3 stretches. Give them a try. Once again, very simple. 1 minute on each one of them. And then there you go. You've got your 5 minutes. And then just try to be consistent with them. Do it for a week and see the difference. See how much different you feel when you're kind of getting into it. Realistically, you can feel, if you don't stretch normally, just even from one session, you're going to feel that difference of your ability to move, and walk around, that in the mornings, I feel way less stiff. Now, common question that I get, when do I stretch? Do I stretch in the mornings? Is it best when I first get out of bed? Stretch when you can, okay? That's gonna be the most important one. And I know that sounds like a cop-out answer. I get that. But realistically, most people, they look for that opportune time and then they just don't do it, okay? So get to it, get your stretches done, and I'll see you on the other side. If there are any other videos that you guys kind of want, I have an idea of what I'm gonna be going through to make sure that you can keep gaming, but keep on being active and healthy as you keep going. All right, Dude I'm Blind signing off. I'll see you guys later.